let's talk about the NBA. The trade deadline is coming up. Brad Stevens and the Celtics, the Sixers, obviously, have a very interesting homestand coming up before this 12-game stretch of all teams with winning records come to an end. By the way, they beat the Warriors. They lose to the Kings. Does that piss you off?
It doesn't, because the Warriors win is just it's a big deal for me.
I see so many people tweeting how pissed they were that the Sixers lost to the Kings. And I'm like, when you saw that 4-game trip out west, you said 2-2.
Yeah.
You never thought you were beating the Warriors.
Nope.
You thought you may be able to beat the Kings.
Yeah.
You got the Warriors. You didn't expect it. Just be happy. These people have to be so miserable all the time.
You can't
But I thought
everything.
you would be the night-to-nighter, because you're a night-to-nighter.
I am, but the Warriors win is too big of a win for me to be negative about the Kings' loss.
Okay. Let's get into this and more. Some more NBA conversation. Sean Deveney, Sporting News NBA writer, right here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Welcome back, Sean. What's happening, pal?
Not much, Mike. How are you?
All is well. Have you ever experienced the Atlanta Chick-fil-A workers? Would you agree that they are the nicest human beings of all time?
Well, no, but I did live in New Orleans, and we had some of the same things going on in New Orleans, where people were they call you honey, and it's a very southern thing. The one thing as a Northeasterner, they take their time. They move at their own pace, and that's just how it is in the South. You got to get used to it, or else you'll have a conniption fit somewhere along the line. But yeah, I know what you're talking about for sure.
Well, let's start New Orleans then, because Anthony Davis is in a situation where I guess 4 teams now he's saying that he would sign extension with: Lakers, Knicks, Bucks, and Clippers. Is New Orleans in a situation where they're kind of have backs to the wall here? Are they in a good spot to be in? I can't imagine. But what is this Anthony Davis situation for New Orleans looking like?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think much has changed for New Orleans. I think that they're looking at a situation where they need to get the best they can for him, and the best they can get for him might not come until the off season. And what the Celtics can offer. I know that there's been all this back and forth about they don't want to go to Boston, and his dad said the things he said. But I think in the end, if you're New Orleans, you're still going to try to wait and see what that Boston offer is, because they can certainly make the best out. They have enough assets to really make losing Anthony Davis a little more worth it than pretty much any other team. You can't go to the Knicks. I mean, there's nothing left there. I mean, they just traded away Porzingis. They may get the number 1 pick, but you don't know. There's just nothing left in New York. Milwaukee, I think he just kind of did that to throw in a small market team and say, hey, look, I put a small. I'd be willing to go to this small market. That was sort of a random inclusion, I think. Milwaukee is just up the road from Chicago, where he's from, so maybe there's something to that. But I don't think he really wants to go to Milwaukee. Everybody knows that all this is the agent Rich Paul pulling the strings and trying to get him to L.A., where he can play with Rich Paul's other major client, who is, of course, LeBron James.
Yeah, that's the way it looks. Now, do you think ultimately – do you like what the Lakers have to make a fair trade? Like, do you say, yeah, the Lakers is okay because they do have fair pieces to give away?
Yeah, I mean that's certainly how the Lakers are framing this, is that we can make a pretty good deal with a guy like starting with Ingram. They tried to make it a Kuzma deal. I think if you're New Orleans, you want both of those guys. You want both Kuzma and Ingram, and probably something else. Both of those guys are very good. They're not superstars, though, and they're never going to be. I mean, Kuzma, I like his game a lot, but he's pretty close to his ceiling. He was, I think he's 24. He was a senior when he came out, so he's a little older. And Ingram, we've seen some good things from him, but I don't think he has superstar written all over him. He's not that kind of player. So they certainly want more, and if they can get a package of high draft picks like the Celtics have, and some of those players, like a Jaylen Brown, maybe a Jason Tatum, we'll see if they would do that. But that's, if you're New Orleans, you got to at least wait and see if that deal will be there in the summer, because the Lakers deal is still going to be there in the summer. They're not going anywhere.
Sean, how much has this whole Anthony Davis situation impacted the Los Angeles Lakers? Because right now I feel like there's a new report every day of tension and lack of chemistry and players unhappy. You know, Luke Walton is now going to be fired any day from all these reports, and the young guys aren't meshing with the veterans, and it just seems like it's a mess. And to me, when you take a step back, it has something to do with Anthony Davis and the trade rumors circling around them.
I mean, it has something to do with LeBron. I mean, this is the LeBron show. It's come to town. When he went to Miami, they had a strong team president in Pat Riley, who, when LeBron started to agitate for Eric Spoelstra to be removed, Pat Riley pretty much shut it down. When he goes back to Cleveland, they put together a team pretty quickly that he liked. With Kyrie Irving was already there, and then they got Kevin Love, and they had the kind of team he liked pretty quickly. They did get rid of David Blatt, of course, after he led them to the finals. That was a LeBron James special. Again, there wasn't that Pat Riley kind of figure, and so LeBron did have a bit of a run of the place. Now he's gone to L.A. and you're really seeing, he is very much involved in the decisions that are being made there, and that's I think to the detriment of the team. That this stuff that gets out about Luke Walton, that's not by accident. That didn't just leak out. That leaked out with a purpose. And LeBron wants to get a coach that he wants in there, and that's what this is all about. This whole Anthony Davis thing, like I say, it's being orchestrated by Rich Paul, the agent, and you can't tell me that LeBron James doesn't talk to Rich Paul and tell him what to do. Tell him, hey, get Anthony Davis Sr. to say he hates Boston. Call up ESPN and tell them that. That's all part of a calculation. So, this is a LeBron James show, and they don't have a Pat Riley there who's saying, no, we're not going to do that. You're the player. I'll make the decisions. That's not happening. And so you kind of see the downside of all this.
Sean, what's your thoughts on superstar players and any all-star type player going to their team and saying, I'm done here, I need to be traded? Is that a good thing for the league, a bad thing, somewhere in between? Where do you fall along that mindset with this Anthony Davis situation, as we've seen past, present, and in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, in general in the NBA, I think it's probably better for the team if you let them know. If you let the team know, hey, look, I'm not going to sign the extension here, you might want to start looking for what kind of package you can get. I think the problem is when it becomes public, when you do it publicly, especially the way Anthony Davis did. I mean, he told the public at the same time he was telling the team. That's not the way to do it. That puts the team at a real disadvantage in terms of how they're able to deal with other teams. Indiana was in that situation with Paul George. Paul George did the same thing. Let the public know at the same time he let the team know that he wanted out. And when that happens, it puts a different kind of pressure on the team, and it doesn't allow them to make the same kind of deal because everybody knows they're operating underneath that pressure. So, I think it's good for a player, who knows he's not going to stay there, to let the team know. I don't know why it has to be public. I don't know why, maybe it'll leak out, maybe the rumor will come out, things like that. But, when you just make such a show of it, it really puts the team that's trying to trade you, it really puts them up against the eight ball. And it's just, to me, the right thing to do is to go to the team, tell them, but don't make it public until after a move can be made.
Sean Deveney from the Sporting News, NBA writer with us here. The trade deadline Thursday. Does the league have a problem with it, or do they actually kind of like this? Hey, I want to get my guys in my bigger markets. Like, I want Anthony Davis playing in LA. I don't want him in New Orleans. So secretly, do they like the fact that these guys are kind of, pushing and trying to figure out ways to get out of these places?
Well, they certainly like the drama of the last week. The fact that we just had the Super Bowl, but all weekend the NBA sort of hijacked the NFL, in terms of attention, and that was such a hot topic of discussion. The NBA is fine with that, but in terms of the general point that you're making, that do you want the stars going to these markets that have been down, whether it's New York and LA? I don't think that matters. It doesn't matter that much anymore if LA is a good team. I mean, they have the TV contract, that they have the local TV contract. I mean, the NBA has its TV contract, which is fantastic, and that's not dependent on the Knicks being good or the Lakers being good or anything. That's there. It doesn't matter if the Spurs are champion, the Thunder are champion. That's not as important anymore as it was, even 20 years ago, certainly 30, 40 years ago. So I don't think it matters that much. And when you look at what Adam Silver and David Stern before him have done, they've put in or tried to put in legitimate means for teams to be able to, small market teams to be able to hold on to their players. You can argue that it hasn't worked, and obviously we've seen that, but they certainly tried to put some measures in that will protect small markets who have star players, and I think those efforts have been in earnest. I think that they're real efforts, but again, it's just they haven't always worked.
All right, Sean, we got the trade deadline coming up on Thursday here, the 7th, and obviously locally, the Sixers, a lot of talk about them, especially losing Wilson Chandler. They're in a tough spot, though, because they don't have a lot of stuff to kind of give away on the current roster. So are they going to be an interesting team? Elton Brand's first trade deadline, are they a team to keep an eye on?
Yeah, I think there's no question. They've already had a lot of discussions. They'd like to get help pretty much everywhere in terms of depth, but I think especially a stretch four. A guy, Chandler was supposed to fill that role a little bit, and obviously Dario Saric not being there, that's the kind of role that they'd like to fill, and there's a number of different types that are available. You can go with a guy like Mirotic, for instance, from New Orleans. He's kind of the high end. He's played really well and is obviously a very good shooter. Can do a few other things, or you can do a more of a specialist. Frank Kaminsky or somebody like that, who's not going to cost you as much, but is also not going to be as versatile and do as many things. So I think that's the real challenge for them, is that they'd really like to get a stretch four, and like you say, you don't want to. I don't think you want to give up that Miami pick. That Miami's going to collapse eventually here, and that could be a really valuable pick. I think you want to try to keep your picks as best you can. But that's probably how they're going to have to get something done, is by using draft picks.
Sean, do you think there is a level of player that they could get back in return that they would be willing to part with the Miami pick?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know that there's going to be, if a guy like like Chris Middleton from the Bucks had, there was talk that he might have been trade bait. He's an all-star this year, kind of a fringe all-star though. But that sort of second-tier all-star kind of guy. I think that would be the kind of player that they'd be willing to make a deal like that for. But I just don't see anybody out there who's going to be on the market who's going to wind up convincing them that they should make that deal. So I think that you're probably looking at more minor pieces. And they still have the memory of what they did last year in the waiver, at the waiver wire, where they get Bellinelli and they get Ilyasova. Both of those guys were pretty good for them down the stretch and into the playoffs, and so I think that there is still something in the back of their heads that, hey, look, we can still bring some guys here, even if we don't make something happen on Thursday.
What about Jimmy Butler? Do you think that there is a shot that they're saying, you know what, this just isn't going to work, let's put him out there and see if we have any interest in that, or is that just completely far-fetched?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that they've made enough of an investment that they've got to play this out. I certainly haven't heard anything that makes me think that they're offering him around, or that teams are seriously calling about Jimmy Butler. I think I think it's the kind of situation, especially with, some of the talk about is he getting along with everybody, and this would be the third straight team that he's had trouble with. You're not going to get fair value on him at this point, mostly because teams are going to look at it and say, well, why are they looking to get rid of him, right? I mean, this is this guy they just brought in. Minnesota had to get rid of him. Why do we want to bring him in? So I don't foresee anything happening on that front.
What are your thoughts on the Sixers role players, Sean? Because that's been talked about locally nonstop, and it's been, quote unquote, an issue. But to me, Shamit's only been getting better. He's been a steal of the draft. We've known that for a while now, but it seems like he continues to develop. Jonah Bolden has been a very nice surprise, at least in my opinion, playing meaningful minutes and getting more and more comfortable on the court. Do you think that these guys can give the Sixers anything down the stretch in meaningful games, or is this just not going to be enough when it matters?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing, is that it's nice that they're playing well in January, and certainly it gives you something to look forward to, but you just, when you get into March, April, and certainly into May, and this team wants to play deep into May, then you want to have some veterans, you want to have some guys who have been through this before, who have played the length of the season. This is not going to be something that, with Shamet, for instance, is he going to hold up, just physically, just going through a full NBA season in the playoffs, as good as he's been, is he still going to be there at the same level in April and May? You've got to get guys who have been there before. So as good as those guys have been, and as much as you do count them as role players going forward, and they will have roles. I don't want to say that you're just going to sit them on the bench for the playoffs, but they are guys that you better have a plan B.
Sean, Boston, this is a team that everybody thought was going to be a walk-away winner in the East. They've kind of, clunkily got through the first half of this season. They're in the third spot now, though. I mean, all of a sudden they're in the number 3 spot if you look up at the standings. But what do you think about the job Brad Stevens has done with this team? Because as you wrote about, he's been kind of an underdog. They were always like the team that fought hard and played with less talent. And now they have a team that everybody's looking at and saying, why aren't they better?
Yeah, and that's the first time. I mean, he's never had that, even going back to college, right? I mean, when he was at Butler, it was always, the mid-major underdog story. And coming into the NBA, he's had much the same situation. The first team that he made the playoffs with had Tyler Zeller was their leader in win shares. He was arguably their best player start to finish during the year, and they made the playoffs. And then they won 48 games and made the playoffs with the team that had Jared Sullinger and Jay Crowder and Avery Bradley and guys like that. Those are the kinds of guys that he really excelled at coaching. And even the playoffs, of course, last year without Hayward, without Kyrie Irving. So this year he comes back, and you have all this stuff. You have players who want their roles back. You have veterans who aren't happy with the young guys. You have, fights on the sidelines at one point. You have these trade rumors. This is the real NBA coaching stuff that he's really been able to dodge most of his, for the entirety of his career, really. And it's a tough thing to handle. And they played well lately, and you have to give him credit for that. But his ability to handle what's going on sort of around the team, not just with the X's and O's, which everybody knows he's so good at, but you've got to be good at the other stuff. You have to be good at the communication. You have to be good at knowing, which guy you need to talk to, which guy is better off you just leave him alone and he'll figure it out himself. Those are the sorts of things that, as an NBA coach, when you're dealing with professionals, much dealing with college players. So that's the thing that really over the next couple months I'm interested to see. How does he handle all this?
Sean, Thursday, will we see a all-star level name moved?
I didn't think we would see any at this point, so I hesitate to say no. But it's hard to see that a guy like Anthony Davis, like I say, New Orleans is trying its best to kind of hang on to him and see what it can do during the summer, despite the pressure. And I almost think that the agent has overplayed his hand to the point where the Pelicans are saying, you know what, we're just going to shut this down, and we're not making anything happen between now and Thursday because we're tired of being bullied by you. So I think that's probably going to shut that that angle down in terms of the best players that could be traded. So I think we'll see. I do think there'll be a lot of movement among role players. I just don't think we'll see another really big name. I think the Pelicans are going to cling to Davis.
All right, we'll keep an eye on that. And Sean Deveney over at the Sporting News, of course, at Sean Deveney, and you can follow him there, and you can check him out from time to time right here, giving us some more on the NBA. Sixers, by the way, tomorrow night, they come back home. Toronto, they got the Knicks, they got Denver, they got the Lakers, and they got Boston coming up. So it is a very interesting end of this tough stretch for the 76ers. Sean, always appreciate it, pal. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Mike.